The Call of the Wild is directed by Chris Sanders, who previously directed films like How to Train Your Dragon, and this is his live action debut feature. And this one stars Harrison Ford and is the story of a dog named Buck, who is going through a very fascinating journey after he is taken away from a rich house, and he's trying to figure out his destiny, see what his place is in the world, and along the way he meets some very fascinating characters, goes on some interesting adventures, until he finally runs into Harrison Ford, and they both embark on a life-changing adventure together. This film was something that I was kind of interested in, and at the same time, I had no idea how to feel about it because it was something that I can't say I was pumped out of my mind to see. But the idea of having Harrison Ford in a movie like this was still interesting, and even though this is a remake of a remake of a remake of a remake of a I don't know how many remakes there have been of this. Yeah, I still wanted to see it. And it is based on the famous story by Jack London, in case you guys were not aware. And I would say this film is pretty much exactly what I expected it to be. It's a really great dog lovers movie. If you love dogs, this is probably going to be your favorite movie of the year. There is so much to do with Buck in this movie, and it is motion capture, which makes the expressions that Buck has actually feel quite authentic. And it makes him very expressive because actually the first half of this movie is mostly him. Yes, there are other human characters, but it's being told almost entirely from his perspective. It's not until the second half that you really get introduced to Harrison Ford, and he shows up a couple of times in the middle of the movie, but it's really the second half where you see his role kick in. Before that, you're following Buck, and they handled this dog wonderfully. The CGI work on him, for the most part, I would say is pretty good. We'll talk more about the CGI later on in the review, but I think they did a very good job of making this a very heartwarming, emotional story that I think most audiences would connect with. Harrison Ford is great in the movie. He's having a good time. He has some nice little moments here and there, and you do sympathize with him at points here every now and then. He's very likable in the movie, I will say that. There's not a lot of depth to give into his character, which is right out the gate. Let me get some of the negatives of the film out of the way. The film is not as narratively deep as I guess it was trying to be. There are things with Buck and John that come up a few times, and they don't really go too deep into this. You get a lot more visual symbolism with Buck, obviously, but not so much with John after a while. So that definitely feels like a missed opportunity. The film is also sometimes lacking in pacing. It does have some of those issues here and there. The film goes a little up and down in pacing. The CGI, let's talk about that because there's an extensive use of it in this movie, and a lot of it has a very uncanny valley approach to it. And I can see that being a problem for some people because it does sometimes rob you of the film's believability. But at the same time, the film is actually sometimes a little more connectable. Is that a word? Whatever. You can connect with it a little bit more because the emotions are there with Buck. And that's important because you spend so much of the film just with him. But at the same time, it does have some uneven CGI. There's one very painfully obvious CGI effect in this movie that you just cannot ignore. The rest of the film I actually think is pretty well made. I think the direction is fairly good. It's very sweet. It's very charming. The connection between John and Buck is wonderful, like I've already said. The rest of the CGI, except for those few little moments here and there, is pretty fantastic, I'd say. And I gotta say, they have done such a great job with this dog. I'm gonna keep coming back to that. They've done a great job with him. The film's overall message, too, about finding yourself and your destiny and, persevering no matter what, is a wonderful little message, and I'm sure a lot of kids are gonna love hearing that one. The film has also some very entertaining sequences that are sprinkled throughout it. For instance, a cool avalanche sequence, which was actually a lot of fun. And it rarely loses you. The film definitely has those themes, though. It does have more adult themes that I wish it hit, but it decides not to, and it decides to go for a more easygoing approach. I wish it didn't do that, but in the end, it is a PG movie, so I guess they could only go so far. That being said, I think there are some missed opportunities nonetheless, and I think the film would have been stronger had it gone a little deeper into some of those topics. There's also a villain subplot that is there for commentary purposes, and it really doesn't work out. There's also a random cameo role from Karen Gillan, which was pointless. Don't really know how she ended up there. Like, what was she between the sets for Endgame and this? But I don't know. But yeah, aside from that stuff, the film is still a fun ride. And like I said, if you are a dog lover, you're probably really gonna like this movie. I think the movie is fun. It does what I think it needs to do with some nice visuals, great soundtrack too, and some entertaining moments, some great comedy here and there, and a few very great sequences, and the stuff with the dog. I think it's all really, really nicely handled. But it does have those imperfections here and there, and the film could have been a lot better because of it. But in the end, I still think Call of the Wild is fine. It's a fine little movie. And I hope you guys enjoy it if you guys do plan on seeing it. I'm going to give the Call of the Wild a 6.5 out of 10. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Look forward to more reviews very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.